In this lesson, we'll apply the principles we learned about the IMAP library into a specific feature. We'll create a test that will fetch all of the emails and assert that the proper models are instantiated. Let's go to our editor and create a folder under test. I'm going to call it system because I want to create a system test. It will go through the network and retrieve all of our emails. The test is not going to be isolated, and most likely none of them will be. The entire purpose of this exercise is to actually confront the IMAP server and retrieve the actual list of emails. So let's create our first test. I'm going to call it fetch emails test. Let's open this file and start by requiring the test helper. Next, we're going to need to require the actual service that we're going to create under the lib directory. So we'll require courier/services/fetch emails. There you go. Now let's create the class, which will be the actual test. Under the courier module, we'll create that class. I'll call it fetch emails test, and it's going to inherit from minitest test. We are using minitest unit here, but you are free to use whatever test framework you wish better. So you can either use minitest spec or even rspec. My particular taste is to actually use classes for tests. The purpose of this test is to assert that the service calls the IMAP server, retrieves the list of emails, and instantiates email objects. So for that, we're going to create one service, which is going to be fetchEmails.new. Then we're going to execute the service by calling the execute method. Then we're going to perform an assertion. Let's not forget to create the actual test. So let's type in test fetches emails. This is a pretty straightforward test. It is going to make sure that the service's emails list contains emails. So we're going to go to service.emails, and we should make sure that the first one is actually an email. So we'll use the assert kind of email and confront it with the first item in the emails list. This is more than an enough test for me because I'm sure that I'm going to populate the entire list of emails with emails. So let's do that. Let me just reindent this properly and run the tests. I'm going to use a key binding under vim, which is going to call the clear command to clear the screen and then run the tests using bundle exec rake test. So let's go ahead and run it. Okay, there you go. You can see that the fetch emails class is not there. So let's go ahead and create it. Let's go to the services folder and type in fetchEmails.rb. Let's open the file on the side and create that class right away. So class under the courier module called fetchEmails. Okay, let's run the tests again, and you can see that it still doesn't work. Let's make sure that this is available in the path. You can see that all of these folders should be inside the courier folder. After all, when requiring anything from the courier gem, we're going to need to type in courier/ and then the remaining components of the product. So let's do one thing. Let's push all of these folders onto courier. So we pushed in models and now services. And then we're going to move the tasks as well. So courier tasks. There you go. Now we get the list of models, services, and tasks under courier. The fetch email service is there. So let's go ahead and open it and push the test on the side as well. Now that's done, let's run the test suite again, and this time we should have an execute method not existing. So let's go to the class and define the execute method. If you run the tests again, you will see that the email class doesn't exist. We are going to need to require an extra file, which is under courier/models/email. This is going to be the model that we'll use to store information on our emails. We're going to create a class of our own so that we can extract all of the logic that's behind fetching the emails. Okay, let's go ahead and run the tests once again, and the email class will not be available. Let's go ahead and create it really quick. Under models, I'll create the email.rb file and I'll open it on the side. I'll define the courier module once again and create the email class. Let's run this all over again and see what we get next. The emails method is not defined in the service. For that, we're going to provide an adder reader for the service, and you will see that this will return nil. The first method is not there. We can do this a different way. I'm going to define the actual emails method here, and the emails instance variable will be retrieved. But if it's not defined, then we're going to provide an empty array. This is a memoization technique that proves to be efficient when retrieving a variable that's not defined yet. You could do something like defining an initialize method and provide the emails right away. And then you would define the emails reader attribute. But this proves out to be a little less efficient because you are instantiating memory right away, which you probably don't need to beforehand. So you optimize this just a little bit by creating that method, and if the instance variable doesn't exist, then you deliver what you expect. Let's run the test suite again, and you will see that we get our expectation error. We expected a nil to be a kind of email and not nil. This is where the hard work comes in. The fetch emails class will connect to the IMAP server, search for all of the emails inside the inbox, and then transform all of that content into actual email objects. So let's break this into parts. Let's review what I've just said. We want to make sure that we connect to the IMAP server, then we want to retrieve all of the emails, and then we want to transform them. So let's do that. So let's go through each different method and define it and start implementing our procedure. First of all of these methods are private, so let's put in the private statement and then define each one of them. So connect, then fetch emails, and then the transform method, so transform. Let's save this and run it again to see if we don't have any errors. And we don't. We still get the expectation error. Now for the connect instruction, we'll need to instantiate a new IMAP connection, which will be the result of typing in nat imap.new. We need to pass in some sort of server, user, and password. So what I'll do here is just straightforwardly pass in the courier_server environment variable, and then we're going to need to connect using login and pass in another two variables, courier user and the password. So courier password, like this. Remember, this is a solution that I've provided in order to hide my real information, just for security measure. You can totally add in the string yourself like this. Just pass in whatever email you're using. Either a gmail.com address or Yahoo, it doesn't really matter. What matters is we're passing the user and password to the login method. This is the information we'll need to pass in order to log into the server. Now it's time we reach the actual emails. But before we do that, let's run the tests and see if everything goes wrong. And it does. We need to specify that we need to require nat/imap. From now on, you should know that the tests will be very, very slow. After all, we're reaching the internet to fetch our emails. It's not exactly a database on your local system, so you should be ready for that. Running the test suite, you will see that we still get that expectation. But notice how the email connection is performed without any errors. There's one thing regarding the IMAP connection, and that is we should ensure that the connection is actually disconnected. So we'll just type in that. At the end of everything in the method, we'll make sure that the disconnect is issued. This is just to make sure we don't have any hanging connections. So every test that we run, the IMAP connection will be reset. Let's go to line 23 and fetch the actual emails. So we'll go to the IMAP object and we'll perform the examine command so that we fetch our inbox. And after that, we're going to perform a search and we'll use the all command because we want to reach all of the emails. Let's perform a loop here and extract the information that we require for our emails. Let's use the each command on top of what we have, and for each one of the IDs resulting of the search command, we're going to reach to the envelope, which is going to be imap.fetch. We pass in the ID and we want to actually use the envelope. Then we want the actual UID. We'll use the same command, but this time we want the UID. We're also going to use the flags to see if the email is new or not. And we're also going to reach to the body. So we'll use the same methodology using the fetch command, passing the ID, and requiring the body text parameter. This will retrieve us the body. Now for this purpose, I'm going to create a temporary instance variable. I'm going to call it email data, and I'm going to shove a new entry onto it. And I'm going to pass in a hash. We're going to have an array of hashes, and each hash contains information on our email. So we'll pass something like this. Now remember that we need to instantiate the email data first. I'm going to do that right in the fetch emails method, so I'll type in email data equals an empty array. The reason why we're using an instance variable is so that we can go to the transform method and convert that data into actual emails. Let's run the test suite to make sure that this procedure is working okay. So let's do it. And you can see that apparently everything still works. Let's go to the transform method and reach out to our emails. We're going to shove in a new email information. But this will need to make sure that for each item in the email data, so email data, and we're going to loop through each one of these items. So I'll represent the item as each one of the hashes, and I'm going to paste that command of adding a new email in there. But notice as we'll have to transform the data here. Let's run the test suite here and make sure that we get a new email. And you can see that it is actually passing. This is the process of transforming our data. It is rather incomplete because we'll need to pass in information onto the email, such as the recipient to the email, whoever sent it, carbon copy information, the date, the body, if it is new or not, and stuff like that. The test is passing for now, but we'll need to make sure that the email contains new information. And for that, I'm going to create a new test. The test will assert that the email contains actual data. So test email has proper data. There you go. I'm going to assert that the date of the email is actually an instance of time. So I'll use service.emails.first.sentAt. This is the name that I'll provide to represent the date the email was sent. This will fail, of course, because the service is right here in the first test. But if I provide a setup method here, which would be the more logical choice, and provide a service instance variable here, this would raise performance issues. After all, for each different test, we would connect to the server. And since this is a long process, it takes a load of time just to reach out to the server and retrieve the emails. I'm going to do something else. The advantage of using classes like this is that you can run code outside of the tests just once. In RSpec, you would probably use something like before all. I'm not sure if this is available in Minitest spec, but I'm sure that in RSpec it is. The way you do that with Minitest test is just run the code at the top of the class without any methods. This way I can reach out to the service in every single test in this class. I'm just going to add in a double @ sign to represent a class variable. So if I go here and add in the double @s, we should be able to access that information. Let's run the tests now, and this time we only get one single server connection for many different tests. You can see that the sentAt method doesn't exist for the email. it is time we go to the email and define an initialize method and provide a set of options. I'm going to make this so it is flexible enough for us to add in any information we see fit, such as the recipient, whoever sent the email, the actual date, the subject, and the body. For now, we're going to stick with these 5 different fields. These are the most important, and for now they should be more than enough, just to justify implementing this feature. Of course, these are incomplete. There are many more components to an email than just these 5 elements. But for now, I'm just going to complete the entire initialize method. There you go. Now we get the 5 most important elements for our email, and I'm going to add in the add a reader for all of these fields so they become accessible from the outside. These are very important for us to assert with the tests. Now that's done, I'm going to go to the test and run it. This time we should be able to have something like this. Well, at least we'll have an expectation error. Okay, we have a wrong number of arguments because we didn't provide anything here for the email. What we can do is provide a default set of options, which should be a hash. If we run the tests again, you can see that we get nil for the sent@at property. This is where we go to the transform method and make sure the data is shoved into the constructor. Something like this would prove to do the trick. We're going to inject all of this data into our email. I've provided this address method to convert the list of emails from mailbox and hosts to an actual string. So in the envelope, we get the from attribute, which is an array of different addresses. The address contains the mailbox and the host, and we join them all together. If the field doesn't exist, if it is nil, for example, in carbon copy situations, you might not use carbon copy at all. So if the field of carbon copy is nil, then we just retrieve nil. We will deal with carbon copy later if necessary. For now, we just want to stick with the fundamental case. So we use that for the from address and the to address. We retrieve the subject from the envelope as well. We use time.parse to parse the date from the envelope. And for the body, we're going to reach the item's body. Then we're going to have to perform this to actually retrieve the body. And then we're going to force the encoding to be Unicode. This is just to make sure that wherever you're sending the email from, you get the correct encoding. And no funny characters will be displayed. Let's make sure that this works. Let's run the tests. You can see that the from method doesn't exist in the array. It is in line 41 in the transform method. Let's quickly run a binding.pry instruction inside the transform method. This will give us a clue of what the information looks like. So I'm going to the email data, and you can see that we have a lot of information. Let's clear the screen and reach out for the actual first item. We still get a lot of different data. We get the envelope, which is an array of many different fetch data. So this is probably the reason why it's failing. Let's jump out of it. I'm going to go to the very first one here. I'm going to use all of this to retrieve the first item of the envelope, the same way we did with the actual item body. You can see the first position here. Let's try it again. I'm going to comment the pry instruction and run the tests. We still don't get the from method, from fetch data. This is a kind of object that's available in the IMAP library. Let's run the pry instruction again and try to retrieve the actual content. I'm going to go to email data dot first, and then we're going to go to envelope to see what's inside. Let's reach to the very first position, and we get the fetch data object. It is a structure that contains an adder method which retrieves the actual envelope. Let's do that. Let's jump out of this and retrieve the adder method and go to the envelope. We should do this with every single reference to the envelope. So let's do that here and here as well. We should do this every time we try to reach out for a component of our email. I know it sounds complicated, but it's actually the way it works. We can try and abstract this entire piece away in the previous method, the fetch emails method. In fact, let's do that. Let's simplify the process of retrieving this back into the envelope, instead of constantly repeating ourselves like we were just seeing. We'll do this for the body and everything. So I'm going to go and delete all of this, and this will be a lot simpler. So let's go here to the fetch instruction, and I'm going to use that precise instruction. Let's replicate the entire content we had. So envelope is in here, and we should be able to copy this right away. For the remaining attributes, this is going to be body text. Then we should just add in the requested parentheses here so we don't get any fancy errors. Okay, there you go, a lot better. So we get the correct envelope, and this should be actually UID, and then this should be the actual flags. Let's see if this works now. Let's run the tests. Okay, I'm going to go to the email data, and you can see that our structure is a lot simpler. We get the list of from addresses, then the sender, the reply to, and the recipients. We get the message ID and everything. The UID is actually 1, then the body is right here, and the set of flags is an empty list. So if you let the test suite run, you see that the subject method is undefined for the string, the date. Oh, of course, let's go to the subject here, and I forgot to remove this 0 index. Let's run this again. I'm going to comment the binding instruction, and parse doesn't exist for the time class. We'll need to require the time library, so let's go ahead and do require time, and this should allow us to parse the correct time, and you will see that the test now passes. We get a correct time instance. Let me just go ahead and replace the binding pry instruction here and put it just at the bottom. I want just to show you what the email class looks like. Let me retrieve the list of emails, and you will see that we get one single email, the from address, the to address, and notice that the from is a list of addresses, the to is a list as well. We get a subject, a timestamp, and the actual body. So that's great. We now have a list of emails that we can reach out to. This is the first step in building our email application. Let's jump into the next lesson where we'll refactor this service in order to list folders. After all, we've been fetching all of the emails inside the inbox, but we want to have a way to retrieve all of the emails in all mailboxes. So jump in. I'll see you soon.